don't give a fuck. You're tripping with JJ.
Wow!
Fuck you, asshole.
Tell your bitch I said hi, nigga.
Know a lot just because my dad, and they laughed and they go, well, yeah, because people from Jamaica don't want to talk about it. They love it, but they don't want to talk about it because it's so poor. And it was just, they said it so, these two men said it so matter-of-factly, like, so I say that because there was these moments in my life where I realized I had a very challenging childhood. I did, for sure. And I'm literally like coming to terms with it as an adult, but even I can recognize, and through reading and choosing to educate myself and choosing to be open-minded, that like, so for me, like, I didn't have health insurance for most of my life. So it is my personal opinion that, yeah, this should be available to people, because I struggled my whole life to get it. But I know kids that like, they were military brats, and I know kids that had 2-income households and they never struggled with it. And they're like, F welfare, F government. Like, they are so against it. And I'm like, yeah, but you never had to.
Privilege.
What if you didn't have to sell plasma to pay for a dentist appointment?
White privilege.
And it's not, and yeah, yes.
Yes.
White fragility.
White,
but
yeah.
it's not just white people.
Right.
It's just, it's projecting your life and assuming that, well, I know, like, because this was my life, so I mean, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Well, that's not true or accurate at all. I respect you. You overcame, but your life is not my life. You're a squirrel. I'm a shark. Whatever. Like, we never cross paths. You know?
Crazy.
And what's crazy is, I shared earlier, like, I was like, I worked so much growing up that I never really dealt with my mental health struggles. And as an adult, I'm addressing it. And it didn't go away just because I'm an adult. It was always there. I just never got to address it until now. First of all, I couldn't afford therapy. And secondly, I didn't have the time because I was working all the time, you know?
Right.
And so I think, like, and those aren't necessarily arguments or discussions I get into with people, but I think, you know, we can go back and forth all day long about, well, with abortion, like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And I'm like,
yeah.
So I guess I'm saying all this because it's not that I disagree with you. This is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter if I disagree with you. You have the right to believe what you want. Just don't kill my baby. Don't tell me what to do with my body. That's because my experience. And the other thing I'm going to say on this, and this is really important because this was a light bulb moment for me. And this is why I kept bringing, like, the toilet paper and all that, right? When I did that speaking tour in New York, you know, you hear about, I saw where my dad grew up, and you hear about things in increments, right? And you, like, see things on TV, and you see, like, back then, like, and still, like, I don't really watch TV. I have, like, Netflix, so I don't see, like, commercials per se. But, like, you remember those commercials where it would be, like, this, like, organization that's, like, donate 10 cents a week and support this child. And so your idea of poverty was only, like, commercials and music videos, and like, it was only media. It was not
real life.
It wasn't really personal experience. And the people you knew with personal experience, I mean, they were your friends, so really on some level they probably didn't totally show you everything, because I know I didn't show people everything,
Of course.
like, so, like, your whole perspective is jaded, and that's not your fault, but just be willing to, like, admit that. Like, you haven't seen it all.
And shut the fuck up in the process.
Right? So that's number one. Number two, when I did this, so I remember I had this cute speech that I used to give to every group I spoke to, and I had this really, because I was the underdog that made the Olympic team, and I beat the number one girl, and she had never I'd never beat her, and she was the favorite, and And it was the miracle story,
You
right?
bust her ass though.
And I had this cool story, like, people are like, what was your favorite part? Meeting Kobe Bryant. And it was all this, meeting the president, and blah. And, like, I'm on the plane, and blah. So I'm in New York, and this speaking tour, it was hosted by Beat the Streets New York, which is this, like, awesome nonprofit organization, whatever. It's literally what it says, like, you're saving kids from the streets. It's essentially what it does. They have them everywhere. But they picked, like, 7 or 8 schools for me to speak at over the course of like 2 or 3 days. And this is actually the same trip that I got my consult from my collarbone. This is a heavy trip. And I remember the first school I went to, I couldn't believe, I mean, I will never forget this experience. It changed my life. So.
How so?
So I get, and they wanted me to like bus around, and I'm like, I'm not from, like, I'm not gonna, so I always had like an escort with me from Beat the Streets, because I'm like, I'm not from here, I'm not gonna, it'll take me 3 hours to get there, like, I don't know how to do this, I'm from Oregon, okay?
Right.
And so we go to the first school, and it's literally this huge building. I mean, if you've been to New York, you know what I'm talking about. It's this huge building, it says whatever school on it. You go in, and all the windows are barred up and it's gated. And you go in, and it's like every hall, every door, it's like fences and bars. It's just like, it's bizarre.
Institutionalized presentation.
We're in New York, though, so I'm like, don't judge Kelsey. And I'm still like, I'm an Olympian. I mean, yes, I went through my surgery, or I'm like going through my injury, and I'm going through my own stuff, but like, you forget what it's like to pay for toilet paper. That's where I'm at mentally.
Wow.
You forget things, right? That's why I bring that up. You forget. And I'm walking in the school. I go up these stairs, and we're like trying to find like where I'm gonna speak. And I go in, and there's like this. We make it, and I realize this building is like 5 different schools, which is normal in inner cities.
Yes.
It is normal. And I don't know what your experience is with that.
Yeah, I'm from the Bronx.
So maybe you went to one of these schools.
Yeah.
That's where I did my last music video, was Bronx County.
I seen it.
So yeah, and it was beautiful. I'd never been to that spot in my life. I was like, what? This place is amazing. And there's so much of that there. But that does not exist without that, right? So I go into this building, and like it like literally, like it hurts me to even like think about this, because like you realize how lucky you are to get out of that, right? Or whatever. You realize, I realized, yeah, I've been through some stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about that. That doesn't make a difference. I go in, and I remember I started in a gym, and it was like crazy. I mean, I just remember chaos. And I meet with the gym teacher, and he's like, yeah, just speak to whoever. And then he walked off. And I mean, it's so weird, because I remember thinking, this guy does not even care. I mean, he's been here so long, he stopped caring. He's a teacher that stopped caring.
Wow.
And I was like, it's not, I remember thinking it's like, it's not even his fault. How do you care?
System,
no one's even giving you a chance to care.
System.
So then we finally make it to the auditorium, and I have my escort, whatever, and I'm speaking, and in my spiel, I realized very quickly, talking about flying on a plane to meet Kobe Bryant. I mean, these kids, number one, have never been on a plane. They don't know who the hell Kobe Bryant is. Kobe Bryant. They don't know who the hell Kobe Bryant is.
Wow.
That's how inner city this was.
Wow.
Like, you're sitting there talking about, like, where do you want to go in the world? And they're looking at you blank face, because they're like, I just want to go to the corner market and get some candy and hang out with my friend. Like, that is like a good day for these kids.
Wow.
Not getting recruited by a gang. I'm not saying that to be stereotypical. I'm like for real. And I realized my stupid spiel that I thought was so inspirational and relatable was like so stupid. And so that was like one of my early speeches, right? And so I went to a couple other places like that, and I adjusted. And then I went to like a private school where they were more like, quote unquote, me, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like even with all the struggles I went through, like I have privilege. And that's when I learned what privilege was. And I realized privilege doesn't just apply to one race. Privilege is circumstantial. And that's when I realized, really, my world is not the world. So for me, that was 2013. We weren't even talking about these things in social media. So, you know, when we bring up abortion, or we bring up punitive measures, or I think about those kids and I'm like, I probably spoke to a kid that's in prison right now.
Wow.
So you want to tell me that they deserve to die? I don't know. Like, what could I have done differently? There was a lot of people that had a hand in that journey to jail. Like, is that kid responsible? I watch enough crime TV too much, actually, because I am always scared of getting, like, abducted. And I get it from my dad because we watch the same shows. But, like, literally, you know, you watch these shows, I Am a Killer, and all these, you know, whatever. And those shows are interesting because they present the criminal, and before they share, like, the crime and the victims, they share the criminal's background, because they want to leave it to you as the viewer to make a choice. Like, okay, well, if you had been in this life, the Files of Gabriel Hernandez, and I'm a hardcore empath, so when I watch stuff like that, I'm really into documentaries. When I watch stuff like that, I don't forget it. I think about it, and I dream about it, and I think about it for days, and I don't sleep. If you haven't seen it and you're an empath, I would recommend not watching it. But that show, it just showed one situation of a child that ultimately he ended up dying. His parents killed him. They abused him to death. And that was a situation where there's a phrase for it, and I don't know it. I was just talking about it with someone recently, where in families, the parents, like, abuse one child but nobody else. There's a phrase for it. Like, it's actually a thing. Right? In criminology. Can you believe that?
Wow.
It's a thing to abuse, like, one child. And this child, they would make him eat cat litter, and they would burn his skin with cigarettes, and it was horrific, and he died. And if he hadn't died, what would he have become? Well, probably one of a number of things. He could have either been an advocate and a social worker, which is one path that a lot of children like that take. He could have been an artist that died of a drug overdose, which you see all the time. He could have become R. Kelly. He could have become a serial killer. He could have become a loving father, like a lot of the Native Americans in Canada. I don't know how much you followed that story, all the children that were found. And then suddenly we realized, oh, like, all of these Native Americans in the U.S. and Canada were abused their whole lives. And now they're alcoholics, and we judge them because they're alcoholics. But we literally took their rights, we took their lands, we took their children, and then we abused them and then killed them sometimes. And now we judge them because they're at the liquor stores more than we are. So when you or whoever asks me, you don't think this person deserves the death penalty, and I say, well, explain to me why someone deserves something. Explain that to me, because if we're going to address, and this isn't on you, this is a question, this is something I face a lot when I do decide to engage in social media, and trust me, I get
deep in it.
I mean, I get deep in it, but people are just mean. People are really horrific, because people come at me and I'm like, you don't understand where I'm coming from, though. You haven't spoken to these people. You haven't seen these places. You're sitting on your phone having an opinion because your parents are in the military and you're a patriot. And you've always had health insurance, and you have never had to do anything to get $1 except ask your parents. You've never done anything to get $1 except ask your parents. Can you imagine? What would you do to get $1 if you couldn't get it from your parents? Because I've done a lot of things to get $1, not from my parents, right? So it's not that I don't see what you're saying. It's that I feel like, and I've always believed this since I was really young, and I mean, I can go back in my journals. It's weird because I've always had this belief, because of what I've seen and experienced. Okay, if you believe someone deserves to die for their crime, then what do the people deserve that had a hand in who they became? Because if we're going to talk about that, let's talk about that. So it's not that
Good point.
I'm not saying Ted Bundy didn't deserve death. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not, if I'm going to say he deserves death, then what do we have to say about his parents who law enforcement knew? It's not like people didn't come to his house. I mean, these criminals, if you watch documentaries, that's what they do. They're not fiction. They're shows, but it's not even really reality TV because it's not scripted in that way. I mean, you're literally interviewing people that have done horrendous crimes. And, like, a lot of these people will say, yeah, child services always came and I had to learn how to answer correctly so I didn't get beat after they left. I mean, I've read books. I have read so many books. I have a bookshelf. I should have taken a picture for you. I have a bookshelf of books I've read on these people. This is stuff I actually really care about. It's not just a soapbox. Like, I've always really cared about this stuff. So, like, these people, I mean, child services showed up. The police showed up. Pedito, the girl that just died, the police knew. They saw it. And everyone has an opinion about it. It's like, yeah, but in the moment, no one had an opinion about it. And you know how many people go missing every day? Like,
all the time.
All the time. And so if we are gonna, if we are gonna judge, okay, well, let's examine that. Let's examine really, So it's not that I'm for killing babies. It's not that. Because I do think a lot of people are irresponsible, but the other thing I realized in that New York, I learned a lot of things on that speaking tour. That truly changed my life. Not only did I see firsthand why teachers stopped caring, and trust me, I don't believe you should coach or teach, and I've been told I should be a coach. My whole life I've been told I should coach, and I don't want to coach, so I don't. I know I could be good at it, but the reason I don't do it is because of this stuff, because I learned that tour showed me you don't do this stuff unless you are willing to do it till the end. You don't stop caring and keep doing it. You don't. You can't. Wow. The second you stop caring, we're talking about children.
Right.
The second you stop, and that's why people care more when babies are killed and when children are killed and when pregnant women are killed. They care more about pregnant women being killed than they care about telling a pregnant woman what you can and can't do. You find that kind of interesting, right? But we are all struck when a pregnant woman's killed, when a young girl who hasn't lived her life is killed. We're like so shook, but we don't have a problem. Like 50% of Americans don't have a problem when a black man is kneeled and suffocated to death. There's actually a lot of people that feel like that was justified. You know what I'm saying? Why is that? When did he stop being a cute young baby black boy that was adopted by Angelina Jolie? When did he become like worthy of that type of death? When do we stop caring and we're like, no, you should know better? When did that happen? When the teacher stopped caring?
Wow.
And I'm sitting here like, I won't even take a train without an escort. I'm part of it, And so, but the other thing that I learned from that experience was I can't put my finger on it exactly. And there's things that I've even learned because, my fiance and I, we want to have a family. And I've never tried to have a family. And I'm 36. I was an athlete in an era where female athletes, people just didn't care.
Right.
I mean, Allison Felix, the backlash she got from Nike.
Right.
And we only know about that because she talked about it, not because it was known.
Right.
Right? So, that wasn't even, it never crossed my mind. I have friends that had children during their careers, and I'm like, you are super women. Like, so now I'm understanding, it's not actually as simple as like, you just like hook up or like, it's not that simple. There's like more to it. And that sounds silly. Maybe, I don't know if you have children, but
yeah,
I don't have children, and I've never tried to have children. I've actually never been on birth control, which for some people that's a personal topic, but I've never been on birth control. I actually try to do most things holistically. Like I hadn't gotten a vaccine for like 15 years until I got Moderna. So like I am a person that like tries not to do things like big pharma. But so I say that to say,
So you're vaccinated.
I am vaccinated. Yes.
What do you say to the people who's not?
It's your choice, but it's also a company's choice to tell you can't work there anymore. And it's also Broadway's choice to tell you can't come to the show. I just saw Wicked, and it was the best experience of my life, and you couldn't get in without being vaccinated. So my fiance had to stay at the hotel. It was great. And I was like, you know what? You're going to have to figure this out because I'm not going to not do stuff. I am an artist. So I do believe that people have the choice. I do believe that. Right. It's not just the things that I care about. I do believe you want to call this democracy, then, be a democracy.
Right.
But I also believe, if United doesn't want to employ you because you're not vaccinated, that's their choice. A lot of the films that I auditioned for, because of COVID, there's a lot of projects I'm on, not all of them, but a lot of them require vaccination. And I would say probably like 80% of them, you have to get tested within 72 hours. And the mandates are pretty strict. And as an athlete, when I was competing, we got tested every week. When I went and coached at Olympic trials, I got tested 3 times before I could even sit in the corner. And you always had to have a mask on unless you were on the mat. And, I think as a performer, it wasn't an issue for me. And my dad has stayed with me on and off, and he's older, and he has some health issues. So for me, it was like never a political thing. I was like, well, first of all, if I test positive, I can't compete or train. And if someone tested positive in my training group, like they would shut practices down for 2 weeks. So, and then I can't get roles if I test positive, and I could literally risk my dad's health if I, And so for me, like, early on, and I've traveled to Asian countries like my entire career, and I've seen mostly Asian countries, but even Europe too. People wore masks for decades because of. So for me, it wasn't a big deal, and maybe that's my liberal culture, whatever. Growing up in Oregon, it just like wasn't a big deal. But I think one big thing I realized being in New York was that. And it's crazy because I really didn't realize this. But truly, there are so many youth that do not get educated on procreation. Like, there's such a lack in education.
Yes.
And people, like a lot of people that have these staunch, like, stances on abortion and sex education and whatever else. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? You grew up and you were educated and you went to your college and you
did what you had to do.
And you always had a solution. And I'm telling you, I have looked in the eyes of a 13-year-old girl that didn't have that. And I wondered after I left, telling her my cute inspirational story, I wondered if this even made a difference. And that is a really heavy feeling, to feel like I have sacrificed so many years for this sport, and this girl is like just trying to make it out of high school. I mean, after doing that, and people don't ask me about this tour a lot, and I've only spoken about it a handful of times, but I saw firsthand that, like, it's actually a miracle in some cities for people to graduate.
Right.
In my high school, there was like 1 or 2 girls that got pregnant in high school, and it was so taboo. I actually personally, I remember thinking, I'm so grateful it didn't happen to me. I remember thinking that. Not necessarily judging, but kind of judging in that way, right?
Yeah.
But you go to a school where, like, statistically, most of these kids will probably have a child out of wedlock or knocked up or whatever, and they will never have known what education teaches so many of us, and they will they will never know life outside of government aid because of their parents. And I believe in government aid, not so people can take advantage of it, but because I grew up poor and I actually don't rely on government aid now, but I understand what it's like to. And that was like the only chance we had. So like, you know, when you ask me, you don't think a pedophile should be killed, or you think it's okay to abort a baby? Well, you're asking me some specific questions, and I just don't think that there's a one size fits all. I just don't. How can I?
Well, who do you put first is the question.
Yeah, right.
Who do you put first?
Well, I think you have to decide what your baseline is, because I could say, well, it's the person at hand, but if we're in, you know, if we're in, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a country that's not like Iran, where women don't have as many rights, you know. And the Iranians, I actually know quite a few Iranians, and they're beautiful people. You know, Middle Easterners, I'll say, generally speaking, there's a lot of beautiful, passionate people. We know because we all watch MMA fights here and there. We all know who these people are. Right. So I think if your baseline is like Middle East, like Candace Owens, I think she made a statement not like a few months ago. She was like, yeah, Middle East knows about masculinity, because she was like dogging Harry Styles or whatever. So if your baseline is the Middle East, then yeah, you're going to say, well, it's actually the man and the government. If your baseline is Middle East or what, that's a very generic statement. I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm being very general.
Right.
If your baseline is the U.S., well, we claim to be a democracy.
Right.
So why on earth would a 50-year-old white man be able to tell me as a mixed woman what I can do with my body because I live in Texas? Like, tell me how you are qualified. How are you more educated in life and in school? Because I have an MBA in business. So you want to tell me that you have more education and qualifications, politically and otherwise, to tell me what I can do with my ovaries? Now, I'm not saying I want to abort a child that's like 8 months. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm saying you don't have the right to tell me it's okay or it's not okay. That's what I'm saying. So you say, well, who do you put first? I'm like, well, I'm not trying to be difficult, but like, what is your baseline? Are you asking someone from the Middle East? Are you asking for someone from the U.S.? Are you asking somebody from China, where at one time you were only allowed to have one child, and they still, like, a lot of people there culturally value men? And even like my fiance's ex-wife is Chinese, and her children, like their children, were raised in the U.S., but they all moved to Peru, so they have some Peruvian cultural influences. I mean, like, we've got some kids that were raised a certain way.
Yeah. And
in America, that would look privileged, but in China, that's normal. In Peru, that's normal, but here they're spoiled.
Right.
So what's your baseline?
Right.
You know?
I see your point.
You know? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Everybody's going to come out different on that topic.
Right.
So, as an ex-athlete, government play a role. The man with the money play a role. In other words, the franchise owner, the CEO. They play a role in athletes' decisions. Whether you like it or not, it is what it is. For example, Democrats and Democrats, liberals, and the Republicans. Okay, everybody's promoting the vaccine. Okay, I think it's a personal choice. If you for it, good for you. If you're not, I think it should be respected, but it's not.
By anybody.
By
any
anybody.
side.
By any side.
Crazy.
Political, Republican, doesn't matter. So now athletes, for example, in the NBA, are facing severe consequences where they're not going to be able to participate in the game if they're not vaccinated. And obviously they're affected by the House of Representatives, the House of
Like they cross over.
They cross over.
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
What I read and what I understand about pro sports is it's not that you can't compete without being vaccinated. It's that, let's say you test positive and you're not vaccinated, your quarantine is like much significantly longer than if you're vaccinated. Like the consequences, so to speak, are different than if you're So that's kind of what I don't know the exact. I'm sure every sport's different, but
right. But now athletes are paying the price for what's happening in Washington, as we all are. But the point is, should that be allowed for athletes to be able to